what would be the most unforgettable moment that you've experienced?
The most memorable moment.
How would you do it differently now, if at all?
I think you definitely should fake it till you make it in the business side of things, but not in the photography side of things.
When we think about the portfolio side of things, are there any tips you can give to the audience, the most important facet when you think about putting a portfolio together?
I'd say for me...
Welcome to the Mood Podcast, uncovering the art of conversation through the lens of photography and creativity, one frame at a time. I'm your host, Matt Jacob, and thank you so much for joining me today, where I'm speaking with Mitchell Kanashkevich, a travel and documentary photographer whose work focuses on those disappearing cultures, spiritual traditions, and the quiet moments of humanity that often go unseen. His images, deeply personal and often immersive, have been featured in top publications and exhibited around the world. But what sets Mitchell apart is not just where he goes, it's how he sees and why he photographs in the first place. And in my conversation with him, we talk about the moment that changed everything for him as a photographer, how his worldview evolved through witnessing sacred cultures up close, and why emotional connection matters more than technical perfection. We explore the ethics as well of documenting vulnerable communities, the tension between the truth and aesthetics, and what it means to carry someone's story with integrity. So if you've ever wondered how to travel and create with presence, purpose, and humility, please listen and watch. Mitchell has some really great insights to share. So now I bring you Mitchell Kanashkevich. Mitchell Kanashkevich. I hope I pronounced that okay, but welcome to the Mood Podcast.
Very, very well pronounced.
Let's kick off with a high-level question. For someone who shoots similar stuff to you and is interested in, why myself as well as photographers like you are drawn to the subject matters and the experiences that we photograph, what is, if anything came to mind, what would be the most unforgettable moment that you've experienced through your lens? You've been shooting for a couple of decades. I know we're going to jump into that, but that one thing that changed you as a person or as a photographer, is there anything that comes to mind in terms of an unforgettable moment?
Yeah, thanks for reminding me that it's been almost a couple of decades. It seemed like it was, literally just, I don't know, very recent, but yeah, it has been. Sometimes you think, that was just in 2010, and then you realize that was 15 years ago.
Wow. Yeah.
And if there was is there a moment, the most memorable moment? That's a tough one because I don't know if there is in all of these years, if there's one single moment shooting. I mean, I think it's really been maybe let's say a trip, I could say, and it like sort of more of an entire trip. The first trip where I really kind of things clicked. I'd say it was probably my first trip to India. Like I think it is for many, or at least it used to be for many aspiring travel and documentary photographers. India sort of was the place where everyone wanted to go. And I think that there are plenty of reasons for that, because it's just such an incredible, vast, diverse country with such a welcoming attitude towards photography. So I think for me, that was a really turning point. And when I really said to myself, I really just want to be a photographer, like this is something that I understood then that's what gets me excited. That's what, really kind of gets me going. And I think it was a reason why it was such a turning point was because prior to India, like right now, I mostly shoot people photos. That's what excites me. That's what basically what I'm about. That's what motivates me, inspires me. And before India, I was actually relatively shy, photographing people. It was like most people probably, who are still relatively new to photography, I would like think, how do I approach this person? How do I um, break out of my comfort zone? And in India, it was just like a hit on the head. Uh, it- People would, and the funny thing was, people would say, "Hey, take my photo, take my photo." So I didn't even have to ask anybody, and
Yeah, yeah.
then that gets me to think about photography in a whole different way because a lot of the time in the so-called Western, world, we have these more negative associations like, oh, but why would people want their photo taken? Why am I intruding? Am I being sort of annoying? And over there, it's like, no, you're not annoying. Come and make a photo, please. Come and have some tea while you're at it. So it was a real turning point. And then the subsequent trips there, I think that kind of really changed my life, and put my life on a certain track. There are many connections that I have, personal ones, because I went to visit the country where I was born, where my parents immigrated from after the breakup of the Soviet Union. Well, it was a country. Soviet Union no longer existed, but in that same place where I was born was now a new country, Belarus. And I would go and visit my grandma, my family there, uh, every few years. And during one of these trips, I actually met a girl that I fell in love with, and I said to her, "Hey, do you want to go to India with me?" Thinking, probably she's going to say no, but it's worth a try. And she said, "Yeah, as a matter of fact, I do want to go with you." So that was India became the place, kind of the meeting point for me and my future wife. Um, because she did agree, and then that's where we traveled, and that's where we had a lot of our adventures and really tests as a couple, I think. And then I figured, hey, after we survived so many journeys and stressful situations, she's the one for me, and I guess she might have thought that about me as well. So
India is
there's
a good
that.
tester of anything, right?
Yeah, exactly. And we were traveling in a motorcycle, actually three people on one motorcycle for 10,000 kilometers. Because then there was one of my best friends in the world. I met this guy just in the middle of the street on my first journey. He just said, "Good evening, good gentleman. What are you doing?" And then I was like, "Man, at that point, India can be challenging, and some people are just trying to scam you." And I thought, is this guy trying to scam me as well? And then we just started talking about the most random things. And I said, "There's no way that this guy is trying to scam me, thinking about talking about such things, such topics." We started. I don't know. He said he wanted to be a model, and I thought it was very funny because he was very short and not really what I imagined a model. And then we started talking about Arnold Schwarzenegger, and I said, "Well, he was my favorite actor growing up," and they just went into because he was big in the Soviet Union, Terminator, and all that. So it was like the most random conversation. I realized, no, this guy's not trying to scam me, and he ended up actually really helping me become the photographer that I am, because he accompanied me on some of my first projects. And yeah, we had also so many tests, so many situations where we just wanted to strangle each other. But in the end, I really just opened my eyes and really understood that there is a whole different way to see the world, not just through the prism that I was used to as an Australian. I realized that in a way it was a very self-centered, maybe selfish way. And it was so much of a shock, his approach to life, but his friendship, like it was almost overwhelming in a way. But then I understood, wow, this is what friendship is about. Like when a guy is ready to come and meet you, you ride 1,000 kilometers from another town on a motorcycle just to meet you, or on time, and to organize everything for you. Yeah, over the years, he's really been like, one of my people who I would call a brother. So that was India as well, and of course my initial body of work, I think that's where really I became a photographer, because I really started to get more into people photography, which is what excites me more than anything. That's where I really started to understand some of the nuances of actually approaching people, of dealing with cultures which are so radically different to your own. So I'd say that, yeah, in short, which is not so short, that moment is actually not a moment, but the few trips that I had to India, probably from like 2005 till 2008, and I still kept coming back. But I think those really were the years that really formed me as a photographer, really kind of shaped what I would photograph. And the funny thing was that after those Indian journeys, because I gained this sort of almost overwhelming confidence from people photography, because everybody wanted to be photographed, everybody was open. I actually kind of rode that wave of confidence and photographed in a place that I imagined I never would have photographed, which is my home country, my birthplace, Belarus, which is a completely 180-degree turn. People don't want their photos taken. People can be suspicious. I remember during my first trip, I would use that same approach as in India, kind of naive. Hey, I just want to make your photo. I want to photograph culture and portraits, and people would be like, "Have you got your passport with you? What are you doing? Are you trying to scam us?" So they were kind of. I remember very, very funnily, one lady in the countryside. When I knocked on her door, there was a girl from a museum that was helping us, sort of showing us some places, and we were together. And then this lady opens the door, an elderly lady, and she says, why are you here? I said, I want to make photos. And she said, are you sure you don't want to steal my piglet? And the piglet is like, at the time I had this very small, beaten up Volkswagen car, and the piglet is like half the size of this car. It's not a piglet, it's a damn huge pig. There was no way that I could steal this
Oh
pig.
my goodness.
But she's like, are you sure you're not here to steal my piglet? So, but because I was so filled, I guess, with those positive experiences, that was not enough to deter me, because I had already had that shift in mentality that, hey, I'm not doing something bad by photographing people. There is value in it, in fact. And so I think that thanks to that, I was then able to deal with everything. I think it's very important when you're getting into that kind of photography to have a lot of very positive experiences to start off with, especially if you're like, not necessarily, I wasn't necessarily an introvert, but I wasn't like really an extrovert. Some people are like that, that they're fine with everybody. They're going to talk to people in the street. I wasn't really like, and so India really gave me almost like a special potion or something, to be able to deal with those situations. So yeah.
Yeah, and one thing people learn as they do more and more portrait photography, especially if they travel, is that every place needs its own approach.
Absolutely.
I mean, we don't want to generalize populations, but generally speaking, you get like an energy and a feel, and you kind of understand, okay, I can kind of say this, and maybe I can approach these people this way, and maybe not this way. Maybe I need to kind of arrange it a little bit more, or maybe I can jump in. And so I think that's just learned through doing.
Yeah, I think the important thing that I'm trying to say though is that is true, but I think being naive goes a long way as well,
Mm,
and believing. I think it's really that mindset change that was important for me, because again, I think from the West it was more like, hey, I mean, I remember I was making a photo of the Anzac Day in Australia, which is was the parade of the war veterans, and there was a man with his daughter, and she was waving the Australian flag. And so I thought that's a beautiful image. And right away I was approached by a policeman asking me why I'm making the photo, and I thought, shit, what a contrast. But again, because I had been to India and I had seen, hey, not everybody is going to treat you like that. I think it's just very, very important to have a positive experience. And then, of course, you can adapt in any way that you need to. But I think it's just incredibly important to understand that it's not a bad thing. You don't need to be like ashamed of it. You don't need to seem like a strange, like all of a sudden feel like you're a really strange guy, because I had then sort of the capacity to say, hey man, it's all good. I'm just making a photo. It was a beautiful moment. Who are you shooting for? I don't remember what I said to him, but I'm shooting, I'm documenting this event. So I think that's kind of where it really played a huge role to just give me an understanding that photography can be appreciated, not only seen like as a burden, as an annoyance, as sometimes many people that you hear, like a lot of the time people will watch my videos or look at the photos and they'll say, oh no, it'd be never possible to do that in my country, or try doing that in the US, you'll get whatever, a very negative uh, uh, kind of pushback. But maybe then you can, once you have that confidence, you can kind of work your way around,
yeah, a bit
and
of
find
people
the right
skills.
approach.
Yeah. Interesting. You talked about that India trip and that kind of seminal moment where you kind of realize, okay, this is where I want to go with my photography. You actually didn't talk too much about photography until kind of we just touched upon kind of people skills and stuff and portraits, but this is what always fascinates me, what I talk about as well, is that, often we don't necessarily think too much about the image or the images. We think more about the experience and the people we meet and the people that kind of form the whole experience. And, I want to read something I kind of paraphrased from your bio, in that you talk about the way you like to travel, seek adventure, and interact and learn from cultures which are very different from my own. You're drawn to ancient traditions, which are still surviving and evolving. Now, that first paragraph that I've kind of pieced together, but that doesn't mention photography at all for a start, until you talk about the images that you want to make, which combine a strong sense of story and convey what it felt like to be with the people I met in the places I visited. Photography became a great excuse to look deeper and to make my experiences more intense. So, you have intensity, you want to learn, different from you, create a story, all of this kind of things that, the image comes last. Well, the image emanates from that, right? From those philosophies and experiences. Where does this kind of deep interest in and passion in other cultures and other people that are different from you stem from, do you think? Why was it like that India trip and the people that you wanted to photograph? Why does that connect with you so deeply?
I think you mean like why the difference?
Yeah, why are you interested in the difference? Yeah, something so different.
I think there are a few reasons for that. I think one of them is was kind of the seed was planted when I was growing up in the USSR. I remember my at school we had these atlases, and in these atlases, I mean, they had probably very politically incorrect representations of different people. But then you'd kind of just have, they're almost caricatures. But back in the 80s, late 80s, I just thought, wow, this is so interesting. Like here are these people with their traditional costumes, and yet, and here are people from this part and from that part and different colored skin and looking completely different. And yet I would only see people like me or something similar around me, because Belarus, it was a place that it doesn't have any, at least back then, it had zero immigration. It was just like people like me. And at the same time, sort of the whole manifesto, I'm actually, it's funny that remembering it a lot now, because I guess those things that shape you as a child, they play a role later on in your life. But I remember that it was all about, although there were never any people from outside, but the whole sort of manifesto of the USSR was that it was very accepting. It was not at all racist, that it was all for sort of the proletariat, for the people, and seeing, USA as this evil racist nation, where that's kind of the propaganda that they were making. But I think there was something very nice and beautiful in that at least the ideology was that all humans were equal and that there was something worthwhile in every human, right? And so that was like one part of it. And I thought, wow, wouldn't it be cool? Like now my daughter is going sort of on this trial month in school. And I said, this would be my dream school when I was a kid her age, or children of all sort of colors and cultures and, backgrounds. And it's fascinating. So that was, I think, where the seed was planted. But then I think later on, moving to Australia, I think it was a very, it was, in a way, Australia is a bit of a bubble. It's like a very almost regulated. I don't want to sound too critical because of it, because I love it. But at the same time, there was no real sense of adventure living in urban Sydney. And sure, we had now different nationalities and different people, but it just felt so sort of dry and sterile almost, many times. Like there was no feeling like, hey, you're gonna have some amazing adventure around the corner potentially. And I think that encountering these different cultures, and especially India, I mean, anything can happen at any time. Like literally, you can go around the corner and you've got like something amazing, something that could have been changed your, like meeting my friend just in the middle of the street, you know, or finding an amazing photograph. I think I like to use this term lately, that I feel a little bit like a hunter or a seeker of treasures, like photographic treasures, and they can pop out of anywhere in some places. But in Australia, I just felt like I don't know if there's any chance for this to pop up. It's probably my shortcoming, at least back then, but you're definitely not overwhelmed by that feeling. So I think that those things combined, the early sort of years still back in the USSR, and then going to Australia and seeing what's possible, but then kind of feeling like I was too overprotected, too sort of regulated, too uh, yeah, shielded, let's say, from the world. That kind of really made me want to see what else is out there.
Yeah, just human curiosity, I guess, that lives within us, some more than others, depending on, like you said, upbringing and environment and confinement in a in a geographical sense. So yeah, that totally makes sense. And now you've taken it from. And I'm going to ask you to kind of explain your life in 2 minutes, but you're in Brazil at the moment, and you're having a month there, and this travel and this curiosity you've taken under your arm, and you've really just gone for it, and you've taken photography along with it. But let's go back to even before India, when you tell us kind of your genesis story in terms of where photography came from, why you picked up a camera, how it happened. Did you fall into it? Was it did you study it, or how did you kind of get into photography?
Yeah, no, the funny thing, I did photography classes in school back still in the film days, and I think the whole year I attended like 5 classes. Um, I wanted to be a professional basketball player, but I didn't grow since the age of 13. So it's very, that dream slowly faded. And I guess in high school, all I was doing is just playing basketball rather than even going to class. And then, yeah, I just realized that it was great. It gave me a great physical sort of start, but not very useful for anything else. And then photography, I was always very visual. From I don't know where I get it from, maybe from my grandfather. He was like born in the countryside, a rural area, sort of really peasant class in Belarus, but yet he had like, sometimes people say like someone has a gift and he could just draw, he would just draw with charcoal on walls, on paper. And I would look at his drawings and I'd just be in awe and I'd want to emulate him. And so when I then developed, I started drawing little comics, and so I kind of started to learn to see things inside of a frame, which I didn't realize would later, I guess, play a role in me really sort of being able to see things within the frame in photography. So I think that it kind of I created certain instincts, maybe through doing that, through making these comics, and the photography itself, yeah, it's kind of a funny story because I went to university somehow, despite playing basketball throughout high school. I just kind of studied for the last couple of years of high school, made it to university in Australia, and I met this girl, and so I fell madly in love with this girl, and she was like really into a lot of artistic things, and including photography, and she wanted to get me into photography. And so she kind of got me into it, and I made these photos of her still with a film camera. And then the funny thing is, every time the holidays would come, she would break up with me and I'd feel miserable. And I'd be like, man, like I've got nothing to do. I'm bored on the holidays. So during the holidays, so after the next breakup, I said, I need to find myself a hobby, because I don't want to feel miserable during the holidays, 18 years old, 19, I don't remember how old I was. And I said, well, yeah, I kind of like photography. Maybe I'm going to give photography a go. I'm going to buy a camera, which back then was not a film. I definitely didn't want to shoot film because I don't have the patience for it. So I actually got a point and shoot. I think it was like a Nikon Coolpix 990, if I'm not mistaken, one of these like twisty cameras. And I started to just experiment, almost like a child, and started photographing everything under the sun, and when it wasn't sunny as well, just really, yeah, playing around. And so it kind of gave me a purpose, and then I kept going and going, and then we got back together again, and then I still liked making these photos, and then we broke up again, and but now I had this hobby, this wonderful way to actually, because I wasn't very imaginative as far as how to spend my time when I was in university, and so you kind of make all of these plans, and you think, hey, yeah, I'm gonna have fun with this girl, and uh, yeah, I was really into that, and then when I got sort of cut off in a way. I needed to keep my mind off of of my great loss at that time, which I kind of laugh about now. But yeah, that's how I got into it. Funny enough, and then the travel thing. I think because with my family, we were traveling to see my family. With my parents, we would travel to see my family in Belarus and would make this sort of long journey. I realized, hey, like I like traveling, and so then these things just kind of combined. I worked a summer job during the 2000 Olympics, and yeah, I think maybe it was then or before then that I got a camera. But I said, all right, I'm going to go on a solo journey. I was 19 and I'm going to go to Hong Kong because I was already a little bit familiar with it. I'm going to go there, see what I can do, see if I can make some photos, shoot some video. And so that's what I did. And then it just felt like such a natural fit to have a camera with you. And rather than just telling the stories, now you could show these places that you were traveling around. You could really kind of take it to the next level. And I realized that, hey, I actually like that. I actually like sharing these stories, I like telling people where I've traveled, where I've gone, and being able to illustrate and then get some reactions. And, that there was something within. And I think, people just have that fire, either the creative fire or the fire of like a storyteller or a communicator. Sometimes we have it and we don't even necessarily know why that is, but it's there. So it was kind of a natural fit. So yeah, I don't know if that answers it, but more or less.
Often people's journey is, a slow, organic evolution into it, right? Rather than just like, well, I'm going to go and pick up a camera now because I've decided it. But in all of these influences from your childhood to your family travels to family artists, right? It all
Or
kind
just
of plays into it.
random things like a breakup,
And
with a
yeah, 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 crying yourself to sleep every night and
it
thinking,
wasn't quite
I don't want to
crying,
keep doing
but
this.
yeah, it was it was
It
one of
was when
these
I was
things.
18. I break up with someone.
Very
I
emotional,
remember
very
that.
emotional, yeah.
Very emotionally immature at that time.
Which
Crikey.
is so funny, right? Because all these years later, you just kind of think, "Oh my god,"
Yeah,
you
yeah,
feel
yeah,
so
yeah, yeah,
embarrassed. But I'm
yeah.
very glad that I got that, that opportunity out of that out of that case, out of that thing happening.
Kind of saved you. I love it. There's a nice poetic story to that. And so when did it kind of become, and more importantly, how did it become a profession for you? When did you go, okay, look, I want to take this to the next level and I want this to be my vocation, my passion, my career?
That was actually, yeah, quite a few years later. I'd say that there was a period. I think I finished university, 2002, and I just started traveling. Because after the Hong Kong trip, I realized, hey, I love travel. So being in Australia, Southeast Asia is close. It's accessible. It is, it's safe enough. It's sort of right around the corner. So next logical thing, I went to Thailand. Now, it wasn't quite as crazy touristy back in 2002, like, that pretty much everybody, I don't know, at some stage, I think was like, okay, I'm going to Thailand, for the first thing that you do. So there was still a little bit of a sense of adventure for me back then. And so I said, hey, I'm going to do that. That's the next sort of trip that I'm going to do. And I got I believe my first digital SLR. I don't really remember specifically, but I think that's where I got my first digital SLR, actually, in Thailand. And then I started photographing things there. But for a while, I was actually really balancing or really deciding between, or not so much deciding, I really wanted to make films initially, documentary films. Because at university, I studied film history and theory, but it was mostly sort of theory. So it wasn't to make films, but it was to talk about films or to write about it. And I realized very early on that I would not find any job with that degree. But the basis that I got from that uh, was that I could really sort of understand the visual side of film. I could understand how films are made, how also it applied to photography. I could understand things deeper than maybe a regular person thanks to that education, you know. But I still really wanted to make films, so I got this back then this makes me feel really old, but it was a mini DV camera with little tapes, and so I'd take this camera and I needed like a big ass separate sound recorder,
Yeah.
and I'd like try to do things on my own. I actually filmed a little doco about a child boxer in Thailand. So I was always interested in sort of things that were a little bit not the mainstream, a little bit outside. And it was also just through chance. Also, I've always believed in just kind of going with the flow and taking advantage of the opportunity. So I had this guy was handing out little pamphlets that was boxing night, and we chatted, and then I said, hey, like this is fascinating. I went to that night and I saw these children fighting. And I said, my God, this is so fascinating that they're just kids, but they're doing such an adult thing. And they're really kind of little warriors. But what else is behind that? Like I
Mm.
was captivated by that. And so he invited me to the boxing camp. He was actually a foreigner who had a boxing camp there. And I went there and I said, and there was a young guy who was training there. And I said, hey, maybe I can make a little film about him. Is that okay if I come back and make a film? And said, yeah. So that's kind of how I got into the filmmaking. But then I quickly realized that, well, I didn't quite realize it back then, but back then was not the right time to make video. It was not as easy and accessible as it is now, because then to edit it, download all of those tapes, to have even the technology to trend, because I spoke a little bit of Thai, but not enough to like translate the whole thing. So I had a translator. We were watching these tapes. I was trying to subtitle this stuff. I mean, technology has changed a lot, right? Like it's incredible that these things that were such a challenge and an obstacle back then, we don't even think about now. Like you want to subtitle it, yeah, just you use an app. You don't need to capture any tape, any of the tapes with the firewire cable and all that. So
Firewire. Oh my God. Yeah.
yeah, so it was I was realizing it's pretty hard to do. And then the next frustration came when all this hard work that I'd put in, and I was accepted to a few festivals, and I even won an award for like best editing, but it amounted to $0, 0 cents, a plastic trophy. And I said, shit, if this is how it's going to be, I can't keep doing this, because I'd still have to keep working jobs. I'd shoot weddings, whatever, at university, I worked as a waiter on a boat. My main thing was that I just got obsessed with travel and photography. So I wanted to do anything and everything to be able to go on the next trip. I think that's also, I'm really sounding like like sort of an old grumpy guy, but like things are so much easier in that sense because you can
Yeah.
actually find a much easier way to make money with your passion, with photography or video, or whatever it is. Whereas then it's like the only real option was like to shoot a corporate thing, to shoot a wedding. And I ended up hating weddings as a result of shooting too many wedding videos and listening to too many cheesy speeches. Um, but yeah, that was kind of the thing that I was always trying to get out there, trying to shoot something. But eventually I realized, hey, this is just too much to do on my own. And parallel to that, I was making photographs. And parallel to that, I started actually, I remember I got this email. Someone wanted my photograph for a cover of a book. And, I had made $0 from my documentary films. And here I was going to get like, back then, I think it was 700 euro for this book cover. And I said, wow, this is exactly the kind of work that I want to do. And I'm getting paid for it. Maybe there's something there, you know? And then, I think I made a submission to, back then it was a magazine called Black and White. I don't shoot black and white now, but back then I did. And it was seen as quite prestigious back then. It was bought by many collectors, photo collectors. And I won like there's a portfolio competition. And if you win one of the sort of spots for the magazine, it gets shown to all of these collectors. And then suddenly I got all these emails, people asking me to buy prints of my images, and I was like, wow, that can happen. That's interesting. Yeah, like they say, hey, how much you charging? What's the paper? How can you send it? And suddenly I had to kind of fake it till you make it because I was sounding like I really know what I'm doing, but I was improvising. Well, I got the prints for all of them, but like I had to quickly learn how do you do it, how do you print, how do you actually post it. Then I made a mistake that I posted a whole like thing, I think in a um not laminated, but like behind glass, basically, So the postage, well, the guy was ready to pay for the postage, but it was like a huge amount for the postage because it weighed like 10 kilos, I think. I mean, now I know that usually people just, roll it up in the tube and and sign it and send it off. But the guy asked for that, so I said, all right, I'll send you that. And yeah, it was like a huge, oversized 30 by 20-inch thing, and I think with a border was even a little bit more. But yeah, like I kind of got an insight into that wow, it's actually possible to make money with this. This is crazy. And I thought, hey, well, let me just see if I can make just enough, because I was always, you could say, I guess, a little bit rebellious in a way that I didn't want to like go the standard route. I wasn't
Yeah.
interested in this is I hadn't been married yet, but I wasn't like planning on having a standard life, with, well, I still don't, but I didn't think that I would have kids, let's say, because that I think changes things a lot and makes you have to be a little bit more responsible and thinking about money. So I just said, hey, I'm going to have this romantic sort of life with a camera, head out into the world, because that's what I want. I want a meaningful life. I want a purposeful life. I want to learn about the world. I don't want to be stuck in the 9 to 5. And I respect people a lot who do that, but I just knew that I would be miserable, because any job that I had outside of, travel and photography, I was just completely miserable, just dreaming about the next journey, you know, writing down ideas also for films, because I still kind of had the thought that I might return to that. Yeah, and so I said, hey, this is something that I really should pursue. I don't know how deep you want me to go into it, because then there's the part sort of when things started to really turn around. Yeah.
We'll come back to that in a minute. I wanted to just have that touch upon kind of how you got into that, but more importantly, like now, 15, 20 years, however many years been now, so much has changed. How would you do it differently now, if at all?
Oh, shit. Now, well, the idea would still be the same. I think that a lot of people try to kind of shortcut the process, but I would still say, hey, make money however you can. If you're doing travel, I think also travel photography has changed. But let's say, even if you're not traveling, just work on your portfolio. Create images that you can be proud of. Create images that will make you stand out from others. That'll find your own sort of voice in a way that's very overused. But try to understand who you are. Try to understand who you are, and I think that should take at least a couple of years personally. So I wouldn't really like necessarily worry still. That part I think would still be similar, but I think that uh, these days, brand deals. If I'm a young guy, I would like try to get as many free hotel stays as possible.
Yeah,
You know,
collabs.
probably try to like do shoots with models, improvise stuff like that, like right on location, because there are just so many more opportunities. People are so much need photos so much more. And then with video also, people need that they understand what it's for, and you can just approach a hotel. You've got a bit of a following, something on your YouTube. You say, hey, I can do this for you. Can I stay here free for a week or whatever it is, however long it is. And so I think that there are just many, many more opportunities. Everything is much faster. Like back when I was making those films, I had to actually send a DVD, in an envelope. So,
Or a
diff-
portfolio as a book.
yeah, yeah, actually, yeah, I remember. Yeah, for a gallery, I took that with me too. Yeah, absolutely. So, uh, I would take advantage. Let's say the attitude maybe would still be the same, because I think it's important to put the work in front of everything else. I think you definitely should fake it till you make it in the business side of things, but not in the photography side of things. You know what I mean? Like, because some people like some younger photographers, they approach me and they say, "Hey, how can I make this my job and this and that?" And then I have a look at their images, and I never want to be discouraging, but to myself, I'm thinking, hey man, you haven't really got anything yet. You don't even know if you're any good, if anyone actually needs your images yet. So I kind of try to find a gentle way to put it, because sometimes you don't know if somebody has a talent yet. Like my first images were hopeless. They're I would be ashamed to show them to people now, but I knew what was inside of me. Maybe that person knows what's inside of them, but they still need to kind of prove it to others.
Yeah, totally agree. I do quite a lot of portfolio audits, and I have those thoughts of the majority of the and not in a, because we've all been there, right? We've all kind of, the fact that people are putting themselves out there is brave enough. But most of the time it's like, well, let's just work on getting stronger images first, and then we can talk about how we put them together. And you talked about, uh, meaning, purpose, voice. It's kind of overused. I use it a lot. I think it's important if you want to go professional, to make sure you have that uniqueness. I don't think there's some a thing as originality anymore in today's homogenized world, but just have a uniqueness to something, and that often comes through, okay, style, but style is again homogenized, but having that self-reflection that you talked about, self-expression.
Yeah, I would say that, in my opinion, and maybe you agree, I think that after a while, it just kind of slides into place. It just kind of happens naturally. Like people talk about develop your style. Like, how do you develop it? Like, do I grab something and develop it? Do I hold the camera and like go? I don't know. How do you
You
actually
just
develop
shoot,
it?
you
Yeah,
do
you
more
just
of it.
shoot. Exactly, you shoot, and then you sort of if you travel, you start to understand things. You understand yourself a little bit more. You understand maybe how you have. Sometimes I think it helps looking at the work of others as well and seeing, okay, this is what I like about it. This is what I don't like. This is how I want to differentiate myself. So it's having a bit of an awareness about the world around you. Not necessarily like very very deep, because I think that even if you don't have a deep awareness of it, you can still have your own voice. But I just think it helps if you're talking about the marketplace, if you're talking about professional. But as far as like developing your style, I'm sure there are many people who don't even look at the work of others who have something quite unique. Originality, yeah, that's interesting that you mentioned there's no originality anymore. Do you mean that it's all like sort of everything is derivative in some way, or what do you mean by that?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, everything, people throw around, oh, be original, and I think there's a big difference between being original and unique. I mean, they're different definitions in themselves, but yeah, there is no such thing as originality in my opinion. We are influenced from the womb as much as, through early childhood, through, and when we talk about adulthood, and you talked about inspirations, we're all inspired by so many things, whether it's a conscious kind of intentional, referral and inspiration and education type thing, or the subconscious side that we take in all of this all the time, especially if we're in the bubble of photography. So, I don't think there is really true originality in that respect.
That's an interesting thought. I need to think about it a little bit more, but I agree. I agree with it so far.
All right, well, tell it. You mentioned competitions, and I know, I want to get this in there because people watching and listening to this will, if they don't know you, they'll be checking you out right now. And apologies if I haven't mentioned this before, but your work is absolutely stunning, right? So it's an incredible body of work, as much as the stories and the kind of the diversity of what you capture and why you capture it. That's what really interests me, as well as just them being, gorgeous images. And quite justifiably, you've won some awards, right? And you talked about awards before, and I think in 2015 you won Travel Photographer of the Year in the Faces and Portraits category. Was this a seminal moment, or are you going to tell me about, when another moment or another period when it all started to go in the right direction for you?
No, honestly, for me, the sort of validation was when I was able to. This is my original vision was I want to make just enough money to survive and live in India or somewhere in Southeast Asia cheap, make
Yep.
photos all my life, or
Yeah.
as far forward as I can imagine. So I was thinking, hey, $10,000 US in India, that'll go a long way. If I can make that, that's enough. I'll consider myself successful. So for me, it was really when I started to regularly make an income from my photographs, and then the whole thing sort of took an interesting twist because I never really thought about like doing photo education. That's what I do a lot of now, right? Like that's basically become the main income because the industry had shifted. I was doing stuff being represented by Lonely Planet Images back then, Getty Images, Corbis, all these good sort of photo agencies just after the golden age of stock had finished because micro stock had come in. And so the whole industry was kind of turned on its head. And those photos that you could sell like images for $500 before were now 15. So I realized, okay, then I guess that's really not the way to go anymore. Like people are not as ready to pay for images as they are to learn how to make images like you, or to have those experiences. So that was a really kind of a moment where I understood a few things. And then I made, I was probably one of the first people to do this little ebook on photo processing back, I think it's 2009, and it went really well. And then I made another one and another one. And all of a sudden I was invited. I was basically given a contract with what back then was a pretty big photography school. And so all of a sudden I was able to have money for the first time in my life and had financial freedom to do whatever the hell I want. And I started to get more publications, but then it was more like a little subsidy or something nice, like sending it off to Geographical UK or something like that. And then just saying, oh yeah, this is great, we're going to publish it, was more like, oh, this is nice. Okay, this is nice, but I don't need it. Because I've already got my, the income, I've already got a certain level of financial freedom that I can only pursue those subjects that interest me and nothing else. And I'm going to be okay if I don't sell it, if I don't do this and that. So I think that probably just understanding that, hey, I'm making money with photography now, which was like an actual equivalent to like what regular people in Australia would be making with a regular job. That was like a moment like that. And then I think when maybe another little reminder, I really find kind of it's weird to talk about your own work, or like your achievements or whatever, because I really honestly haven't really given a crap about it, because I've sort of been just enjoying the ride. And so I haven't really pursued that. But I remember that when I was an ambassador for Panasonic, and then they allowed me to shoot a campaign for them, and I was kind of one of the faces behind one of the cameras. And at Photokina, they had this huge print of my head next to Neymar, because he was also one of Lumix's ambassadors. I said,
Okay.
shit, this is kind of, interesting. I never expected that it's possible to do this with photography, to be at this biggest photo expo in the world, and to actually, I mean, you couldn't actually see my eyes because the whole idea was that the camera, but I knew it was me. The camera is like, you're like Cyclops. The camera is covering your face, but that was kind of the idea of this campaign, because I shot the images and then they shot a little video about me actually using the camera. So then that was kind of a moment where I thought, okay, you're doing pretty good. You're doing sort of something far beyond what you thought was even possible with photography. And the travel photographer of the year, I mean, uh, I think that was like one of the few competitions that I entered, and I wanted to win the whole thing. I didn't, but it was definitely a nice thing. I tried to leverage that as much and milk it for all
Get
that I could.
plaster it everywhere. Quite rightly. Did any doors open for you after something like that? I mean, I don't really love the whole award thing, because it's kind of like, I don't know. We can talk about that another time. But uh, did it? It's almost like a marketing tool in itself, right?
It is. It absolutely is. So I was quite strategic about it, because I said, hey, I'm going to win this competition, or at least win a category. And then I'm going to make another product, how my images won in this competition.
Very
So
clever.
So I thought, okay. And that was good. I made this course, and it was sort of my main bread earner for quite a few years. So that's what I mean by sort of milking it, because people wanted to know how to make that. And I thought it's actually a great opportunity, because all of a sudden now you have these images, like, also I don't like this whole idea of validation, but like it or not, that is the case, that this is sort of a stamp of approval. These images are really good. So if you want to make images like this, then, they won an award. But then also not that long ago, which I think it's very funny, I'm very cynical about all these things, but there was a tourism board, the tourism board of Andalusia in Spain. They saw this award and they thought that I won the whole thing. which I'm always careful to point out that I'm a category winner, you know, uh, which is, my specialty people, but they're just, they liked it. And then I don't know where they found me, but they invited me for this really big campaign that they did. They invited 10 photographers slash YouTubers slash influencers from around the world to shoot quite a big campaign for Andalusia Tourism Board. And that was just sort of 23. Yeah, it was time at the end of 23. So yeah, that kind of opened a door much, much later, like thanks to that, it was one of the things for those people who just want to put it as something impressive to show, to justify, I guess, why you're getting this random guy.
It helps. Yeah, for sure. I want to move on a little bit to kind of the lessons in the madness and kind of your processes of, doing, I guess a normal, in inverted quotation marks, a normal shoot. When you travel, I want to know a little bit more about kind of, do you use guides? How do you set all this up? But more importantly, I want to talk about what your intention is when you go to these places, especially when it comes to the ethical balances of, accessing these people and to taking photographs or collaborating with them, and how you give back if that's a continuous kind of mindset that you have. So yeah, no specific question there, but just kind of walk us through how you approach a project in itself when you're doing a travel project.
I think it has changed a lot. Yeah, a hell of a lot. In India, it was all with his friend. And I'd say in my young days, it was a lot of taking. I was 25, and India is such a generous country that people are, more than willing to give. The thing that I wanted to give back was my attention and my time, and just really caring, because there are cases where photographers go and they couldn't care less. They see, as one of my friends put it, they see a subject, a person in front of the camera as a reflective surface, basically. You may as well use a mannequin if you sort of have that mentality. So I realized that early on, that people, they really appreciated just being heard. Not only that, hey, snap, snap, see you later, because I was traveling with my friend, I could actually get to hear their stories, and I learned a lot from him. He was the king of small talk. And so I learned that, but then it always progressed to a natural sort of conversation. People wanted to share. They're really, in India, people are extremely curious. They wanted to know about me, about, my wife. They were asking so many questions, and I was ready to answer them. I loved that interaction. So I think early on, one story in particular stands out. There was a guy who had shown us around his village 4 days. He was so hospitable, and then the only thing he wanted at the end is for us to come for dinner at his house. Now the problem was that we really wanted to have an early night, and I would need to like drive 20, 30 kilometers in the dark, 20, 30 kilometers in the dark back to the hotel.
Which
And
in
the next
India is
morning,
pretty dangerous.
exactly. Yeah, it could be a cow or a child in the middle of the road. A lot of the time, vehicles also don't have lights. But yeah, and so what happened was, and we needed to start early because we had a long distance to cover. And I said to my friend, man, please tell him that we can't do it. Thank you so much, but we can't do it. And then the guy actually cried. This grown man, he actually cried that we said no. And I said, okay, fuck it. I'm gonna forget it. I am gonna come for dinner because he's done so much for us. That's the least I could do. It's like he's done all this and he wants to give me more. So I did do it, and that sort of made me realize that sometimes people just really love to be seen. They love to be seen as a human being, and they love to have just a genuine exchange. Sometimes it really is as simple as that. And I think in the West, also that's something that all people are missing. Now, in the early goings, there was in countries where I don't speak the language. Of course, it's guides, it's translators. When I traveled to Indonesia, I had actually picked up Indonesian quite well, and after 6 months, I had basic conversational Indonesian, which I can't recall much of now, which was in 2008. But that really helped. So I didn't really need a guide there, although still, we did. I remember travel with a wonderful girl in West Timor who, again, three of us, me, my wife, and her, on this little moped going through deep mountains, and she was just getting us into all these places, and yeah, kind of being our key, our window, our bridge between us and that culture. And so there was a lot of that. But recently, what I've been doing is I think almost for the last decade, I've been traveling in countries where I speak the language, right? So I traveled a lot in the former USSR. I speak Russian, and they speak Russian from 2015 or so. Georgia, Armenia, Belarus. So I spent a lot of time in Georgia and Armenia, and it was wonderful because no longer did I need somebody to be in between, you know. But yeah, having those people was fantastic. They became some of my friends, my brothers. I still keep in touch with them till today. There was a friend in Mauritania. There was a friend in Ethiopia who sadly killed himself, but we kept in touch. And yeah, everybody I kind of tried to keep in touch with even until today. Uh, Now in South America, a big reason why I'm kind of stuck here since 2019 now is because I speak Spanish and I'm improving Portuguese. So that's as far as communication goes. Now, as far as giving back, or I don't know if you want me to talk about, I'll say the giving back part first. Like now that I'm traveling in a car, I think some of the basic ways are, you're in the middle of the desert in Mauritania, and I had my Land Rover, and these nomads, they need to get, through this sandstorm, they need to get to their village. It's much easier if I drive them. So I really started to see little things like that, elderly people in the Andes, they need to like walk 10 kilometers. They flag me down. Hey, great. And it's crazy that later on this woman remembered it, and she gave me homemade cheese and corn the next day. So, little things. I just try to do little things like that, not necessarily thinking very big scale, because I haven't necessarily done any very specific projects recently. But as I am applying for some grants that I would like to do, there is that social component to give something back to an entire community. And just recently, I was thinking about it. I think it only makes sense now, because the world, it is, it's changing, it's different. I think a lot of the time, the work that only people like me could do maybe in 2008, now there are local photographers that can do very similar work.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what can you bring that they can't bring? Can you bring attention from outside? Can you maybe help out in some way? But also in general, I think I often do befriend the people that I photograph. Like we have a relationship. Like there was a family in Colombia. We met randomly, ended up just hanging out. I'd invite them for dinner every other day. We went to like a water park, things that maybe they didn't have a chance to do. But because we became friends, because I had a car, which they didn't, just little things like that.
Yeah, I think everything you're saying is totally resonant with how I would certainly want to promote to others in how do you go about traveling with a camera, right? And if we simplify that and dilute it down, a lot of it just comes with the willingness to spend time, with people, whether that's rather than just jumping into a location because it's a sunrise, getting shots and never going back there again, right? Or the opposite, where it's like it's more of a collaboration or involvement if the opportunity arises. Like, let's just spend some time together, right? Jump in a car, give back to strangers, but also the people that you're trying to shoot. Like, let's just sit and spend some time with each other, because like you said, that's what people really appreciate. And therefore they kind of trust you a little bit better, and
you do get better photos as a result, and yeah, and you kind of just feel better as well, I think.
But also, like you said, it's not just giving back in that location. It's also like, so when you do exit, what are you going to do with those images? How are you going to tell those stories, and how are you going to, represent and distribute, and what else are you going to do around that, if at all, if necessary? So, how do you think your images impact those people that maybe haven't traveled or haven't kind of maybe in some cases left their country? do you believe that that kind of visual exposure matters to give maybe those people a voice, but also educate others in order to be maybe a little bit more empathetic and kind of shift their
I think
perception
for
on things?
me, there's a big thing for me. For the last few years, I've really tried to avoid photographing the frequently photographed topics and subjects, right? So, like there are a few of these now cliched subjects around the world. That list is growing. Um, but I because sort of I've had this obsession since early in my photographic journey to be able to have control, to be able to have a vehicle, to get off the beaten track, to go to places which other people don't go to. And yeah, I do want to, I don't want to exaggerate and say I'm giving a voice to these people because maybe they don't give a shit about me giving
Yep.
them a voice, you know.
Yeah. Not everyone wants that. Right.
But sometimes they do. Sometimes that, like in Brazil, they say that, hey, that's cool, show us, and I think that show what we do here. Again, some people they're just tired of the photographers or tourists in general coming in,
Yep.
and they couldn't care less. So actually, that's what I've really been seeking lately, is to be in those places where I'm wanted. Why I love Brazil so much, because it's kind of a combination of all these countries that I've been to, and it's very interesting visually, and it's welcoming, and it's warm, and people are wonderful, and I really feel wanted. Like people really want to share their culture here. They really, it's like, hey, you want our culture? Hey, take it, come, enjoy, be a part of it if you want. So that's one thing. But also, like for recently, I'm often kind of in research mode for projects. Like they might just end up being something small. They might not end up being anything at all. But I was like following a particular river in Brazil and just seeing some of the fishing communities there, and I realized before long that these are places that nobody goes to at all, you know, like people just don't know that they even exist. So in that way, it kind of automatically becomes uh, a way of actually just showing, hey, look at this exists, these people exist. And in some way, I think it's almost like an homage to regular people, because obviously in the media everything is clickbait. It's like, everything is very
Sensationalized.
loud. Yeah, the competitions also. It's often like things that you've seen before. It's a style that you've seen before, but it's like these very loud, like it's reindeer herders or I don't know, whatever, like Bhutanese something, or some of these things that have now become very well known. I'm not saying that there's no space for that, but just for me, it no longer interests me as much. I realized that I was kind of doing that early on, although I think that when I was doing it, I was probably one of the still first ones to be photographing some of the subjects that, like, like these Indian wrestlers that wrestle in the mud, or
Mm.
the sulfur miners. Of course, they were already known back then, but they didn't become like part of the mainstream in a way. And like now, some of these subjects, they're not quite on the level of the cormorant fishermen in China, or the Mongolian eagle hunters or something like that. Which are really, over the last years, have become over photographed. And actually, it's interesting. I think there's still room to photograph that, but you just have to photograph it completely differently. You have to kind of acknowledge the cliche and just photograph it completely differently. But I guess what I'm interested more is having my experience, because it's just so much more deep, so much people give you more time, and they appreciate more that you're there. Like, and now that I have my daughter, we went to one of these random middle of nowhere villages, and all the kids wanted to play with her, and she enjoyed it too, because these kids weren't stuck in their phone. They were running around and they're playing catch and doing all of that. And these people were just fascinated by us. So again, it kind of goes back to giving back in just a way of interaction and acknowledging the people, but yeah, showing that.
Yeah, there's giving back to the people that you are photographing with and around, but there's also giving back. You talked about education earlier, and the courses that you do, and the photographers that you educate. You can give back in that way as well. Do you feel like there is a responsibility for you to educate in the right way and in more of an ethical way, rather?
Oh, absolutely, 100%, 110%, absolutely. Yeah, I mean that's one of the things.
That's really where we can make differences, right?
Yeah, again, I think after many years I've become quite cynical, but I think that the least that I can do, yes, I have to be the one, not the one, but one of the people that's kind of saying, hey, slow down. The picture sometimes is not the most important thing. You know, uh, you may be the first person and the last person that this person that you're photographing will see from the outside world. How are you representing not just your country, but the whole outside world to them, essentially, right? Because if you make an impression that you're an asshole, then they're probably going to think that everybody's an asshole outside.
Yeah.
So that's
Yeah.
kind of how I look at it. Yeah, I mean, there are many levels to it. Again, I think that there's not necessarily a right or wrong, and I'm not necessarily against like not being obsessed with this idea of like directly helping that person. Like bringing prints is nice and all of that. So and doing little deeds is nice. I believe kind of in the bigger picture, like that this idea of karma, I guess. That someone is hospitable to you somewhere, you then help out somebody else. The kind of making reaching a sort of equilibrium in a bigger picture of the world.
Yeah. Fascinating. Um, I wanted to also just try and kind of gate that topic off before we move on to trying to get into the heads of your audience and your viewers. If the average person could see what you've seen, how would you think about how that might change them, right? Because there's so many. I'm a big believer of travel. I think it's the best education tool. I'm sure you agree too. But for those who can't or don't want to or don't have the means to, blah blah blah. How do you think, if you're able to kind of get them in your head, how do you think that would change them?
I think it can kind of turn their world on its head. Some the prejudices go away very quickly. You may think something about a people, and this is one of the things that I said. That, look, first of all, you as a photographer, the prejudices they do not apply to you. You do not even think about that because you're going there clean slate. You don't care about what this people thinks about that people. That's not you, and it's not going to help your work. But then, you know, you travel to whatever country it is, and you may have a certain uh, idea about what people there are like, and then you meet them. Somebody is the other until you meet them. It's very easy to hate the other. It's very easy to hate them. Them until them becomes a friend, until them
Yeah.
becomes somebody who gives you a window into their culture and shows you the beautiful things about. So it has happened even with me. There are some prejudices that we have, and then I when I went to certain places and saw certain things, I said, "Shit, how wrong I was." And I
Mm,
think that a lot of people could need a very heavy dose of that. Because um I hate this thing of saying, "Oh, ultimately we're all the same," because of course we're all the same. We're human. I mean, I am interested in the differences, but I think some people don't realize that. I think some people don't realize that we're all the same ultimately. They think that somebody might be a fanatic, somebody might be this and that, but it's like, dude, like really everybody is driven by more or less the same things. And sometimes, yeah, you just need to see that, up close. You need to maybe feel their pain that they feel pain like you, feel their joy that they feel joy like you. So yeah, all the prejudices just disappear like this once you travel.
yeah, it's like therapy, isn't it? And it happens fast. People who haven't had those experiences, and they just have to have a day in the life of, right, and meeting these people, like you
It's just
said,
a little deed
realizing,
sometimes.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly, yeah, and they just end up realizing, oh yeah, they're a human that's struggling with exactly the same things I am, but in a different way, with different background, different context, different perspectives. But well, yeah, it's like music to my ears hearing you say that. So thank you.
I think also what travel does is it gives you perspective, because like you say, it's the best teacher because once you know, hey, people are like there, they do things this way. Here they do things that way, and there they do things another way. So do you really think either one of these ways is really the best? I see with some of my friends that don't travel, they'll say, "Oh, but it's there," and I think that they're the center of the world. You very quickly realize, hey, you're not the center of the world. your way of thinking is not the only way of thinking. Your religion is not the only religion. There are other things out there, and what you want to believe is what you want to believe. But give space to the other thing, the other beliefs and the other cultures and everything else as well.
Love it. What do you hope your body of work contributes, if anything, like after you've gone, once you pass away? I always kind of, that's how I gain perspective. I think, well, in 100 years time, no one remember no one cares, right? So what are we doing this for? But photography is beautiful in that respect, or any kind of visual art that might be able to remain. And now in digital media, we find ways to kind of keep things around permanently. Do you care about that in terms of a legacy, in terms of what you want people to feel even after you're gone?
I used to care much more because I felt like I was on this mission to photograph these, far away cultures and everything like that. But now, like I said, the whole world is changing, that within those cultures, people can photograph them. Like, I went to an event, a middle of nowhere event with these cowboys in Brazil, and there were two people with cameras there, just local guys, documenting the whole thing just for the love of it. So I don't know if that's going to be the legacy. Uh, yeah, to be honest, I think about it less and less, because I think everything is going to change, and who knows if anyone is even gonna care. So I think my goal is really just to make my life I don't know if it sounds like weird, but to make it a masterpiece in a way, to just try and have these experiences, the most deep experiences possible. Try to affect as many people as possible in a positive way, whether it's online. Also, it's a little bit hard sometimes online until you see the people to actually really feel any impact. Like, sometimes you'll get a very nice email. Sometimes I've been lucky to have people recognize me from a couple of my videos, actually in the middle of nowhere in Peru. And we became friends too. But like, and then you realize, oh, I
Awesome.
impacted that person in a little way. Or, somebody says, hey, like, you made me see photography in a different way. So, but there are so many different ways. And I just really want to focus on, all right, how do I get the most out of this here and now? Maybe it's a flaw in a way, because I'm a little bit blind sometimes to the future, or the past, but I try to be in the present as much as possible.
I think that's really, really important, and a way to stay grounded as well, which I think is also extremely important. Last few questions, and we're kind of up against time, but when we do talk about kind of the aesthetics of a body of work, right, that we can put out there, whether it's for a book or for an exhibition, or whether it's just like our life's work, when we think about the portfolio side of things and putting images together, are there any kind of tips you can give to the audience in terms of what maybe the most important facet of is when you think about putting a portfolio together?
You mean just selecting images, or how it all works together?
Both.
Both. Uh, I'd say for me, the photos that, I mean, look, it really depends. If you're just doing like a best of, your best photos, and that's your portfolio, if it's not targeted towards somebody, I would just say that, I've over the years, I've come to appreciate like depth much more over aesthetic, depth of sense of story, mood, emotional connection. Like, as I'm looking at a photograph, am I just thinking, oh yeah, it's very beautiful, it's aesthetically very pleasing. Look at this light, look at this, look at that, or does it just like smash me on the head? Or does it sort of is it almost like, I like to sometimes compare the effect that a really great photo, it could be like a poem or a song, and sometimes you don't even know why the hell it affects you so much.
Yeah.
Uh,
Like the
and and
goosebump
s-
test.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I don't know if I've had goosebumps too much from photos, but yeah, the idea, the
Looking at the wrong
idea,
ones.
yeah, maybe
Yeah,
I'm
but you
too
know what I mean.
cynical.
Yeah, it's more of a
Absolutely.
metaphor than it is, yeah, literal. Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. So I think that's like, find a few images that do that, right? That you look at and then it sticks. And then I think if you remember something a few days later, that's something, that really. is a strong photograph. And there are various tips that people say. You can print it, hang it on your on a wall or whatever, and then see if you get sick of it in a few days. See if it still has that same impact. Leave it for a few days. See if it still has the same impact. And the thing that I mean, I've not updated my portfolio for a long time, but what I would usually do is I would always change the photo. So like you take out the weakest one, like maybe a year later, one image doesn't resonate with you anymore. You realize, hey, this is just more of a pretty picture. I want now something more that's like either hard hitting or just gets kind of right, to the emotional side, really appeals to you, to the emotional side. So that's how I would do it in that regard. And then when you're talking about having it all together, that really depends on what you're going for. Like on my website, because I had this sort of was creating this sort of the idea was to show that I'm a travel photographer, that I do have a certain visual aesthetic. I was just selecting images
Right,
within
based on that
within that
commercial
sort of
target.
category. Yeah, maybe with some commercial potential. But yeah, I think I think actually also that could be different. That the things which resonate with me most now may be different from those photographs that I would use for commercial purposes. Although I want those things to kind of come together, I think that's the ultimate sort of dream and aim. And I see a lot of people that when they want to walk that line of not kind of giving a crap too much about the commercial side, that sometimes people kind of turn away from them, and it's almost professional suicide in a way. It's like all of a sudden completely delete your portfolio that people have come to know you for, and then you just like upload photos that you love making. It's like, oh, it'd be
Yeah,
great if it worked, but sometimes it's just it's risky.
yeah, it's good tips. All right, well, as we're wrapping up, I'm gonna ask you one final question, and it's essentially what we want to leave viewers thinking and leaving and thinking and feeling as they kind of end this conversation. So what is your wish for the world? What is it that you want people to be tuning into right
Just
now
peace
and
on earth.
and take it peace? Yeah, just peace for the world. Let's think photography specifically. Is it the ethical approach that we want for people to travel with? Is it, a technique? Is it the way we treat social media? We haven't talked about social media. It's kind of one of the first conversations I've had where I deliberately not kind of touching social media. But what is it you feel most strongly about? I guess when you want to kind of talk to other photographers out there.
Well, what's my wish as far as photography goes when I'm talking to other photographers, or just in general?
Other photographers. I mean, most people watching, listening to this will be either photographers, hobbyists, or professionals. So, is there if there's no message, that's fine. Is there anything that you want to speak to them about that you feel strongly?
Yeah, I think that with time, it depends what journey you want to make, right? What you want with the journey that you want to take. Basically, I think it depends on what you want out of life, And I have this sort of, rather than think about what I'm going to do in the future, I have this sort of the deathbed test. If I'm on my deathbed and there are things that I'm going to be proud of, or not proud of, what is it that I am going to be proud of? What is it that I'm going to reflect on and just go, yeah, that was really cool. That was really great. Is it going to be awards? Is it going to be professional achievements? No, not really. It's really those experiences. It's really the friendships. It's really the other things out. Is it like, wow, I made it, even if I was Steve McCurry and I made the Afghan girl, would I like be laying there and going, I fucking made that photo. I am a photographic legend, I don't know. It wouldn't get me to say, yeah, that was great. I'd like to uh, just reflect on all of those amazing things that the kind of photography that I do has brought to me. That's really, I think, what I'd like. And I think it's
Mm,
for that passion, for that fire to stay alive. I think it's very important to reflect on that at least every now and then.
love it. Mitchell, thank you so much for joining me. It's been fascinating to kind of dive into your experiences and get a little insight of what's going on in your head. So I wish you all the best. Enjoy Brazil. Can't wait to see more of your work. Are you going to be shooting much out there? Or is it more of a break?
Oh no, I was like shooting more than ever. The most that I've shot in the last 10 years. It's just that now I'm taking a break right now. But yeah, traveling and shooting very intensely for about 2 months. I was just kind of, after being a father, you have to step back a little bit with the shooting. But here I was really reclaiming my identity as a photographer, I think.
Love it. Well, best of luck, and thanks again for joining me today.
Thank you. Thank you very much.